Hello and welcome to this special edition of Inside the Americas. I'm Nadia Massi. This week we're taking an in-depth look at native communities across the Americas. From north to south, Indigenous people still face discrimination, land theft and violence. Coming up, we'll speak to an expert to find out where the greatest challenges are and what can be done to fight for the rights of Native Americans in 2018. Well, we begin then in Mexico, where there are over 60 Indigenous languages and the communities there are as diverse as they are many. But if one issue unites them, it's the sense of being marginalised by Mexican society for decades. This year, with the election of the leftist Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, Native communities now hope now is the time they can be better understood and recognised. Our team on the ground reports.
July's municipal elections didn't reach Teotihuacan's town hall. They never do. Residents here voted for a new national president, but their next mayor will be selected by crowd applause at a meeting in a couple of years.
In this town, we follow our customs and traditions. For example, the community chooses its individual leaders. There are no political parties. We have nothing to do with them here.
The Mexican Constitution gives Indigenous communities some autonomy to rule based on their customs and traditions. Many of those are still widely and proudly practiced in Teotihuacan.
This stick is very important for us. If someone has a bad attitude, a person called a topile goes to their house holding this stick and they have to obey immediately.
Far away from the urban centres of the world's 15th most powerful economy, the Zapotecs have their own ideas about progress. They value preserving artisan traditions over technology and industrialisation. That's why many here voted for Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador. He'll be Mexico's first president from a left-wing party.
He wants for us to be active and participate in his national project. He wants to support agriculture so that people can be better off in their villages and not have to migrate.
Here's the man who'll be in charge of Indigenous matters under the next administration, Adelfo Regino. He's fluent in Mixe and wants a radical change of policy.
Sadly, our people are often treated like props for public policy. They design projects and programs for our Indigenous communities from the outside. They come and impose them without taking our reality into account. It's important for us to reverse that trend.
Almost 20% of Mexico's population is Indigenous, and most are deeply marginalised. Yet they're still a huge driver for one of the country's biggest sources of income, tourism.
Well, to discuss the situation in Latin America in a bit more detail, we can now bring in Irène Bellier, a researcher and expert on Indigenous communities at the National Centre for Scientific Research here in Paris. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme today. We just heard then in that report about how Indigenous people in Mexico often struggle to have their voices heard in national politics. Give us a sense then, across South and Central America, how big of a problem is political representation for Native Americans?
Well, for all Indigenous people, the issue of political representation is a strong issue, particularly because they are in a minority in most of the countries. And if they are not in a minority, they are also very diverse. So as you mentioned, there is like 668 Indigenous peoples belonging to 364 different languages, or speaking 364 different languages, and in Mexico only. And they belong to 11 families of languages. So can you imagine to form a unity is quite complex, because we had sort of constructed the Indian as a one people, when we are realizing nowadays that they are extremely diverse as could be, for instance, British people and the French and or German or others. So for them, it's extremely complicated to access the political representation, and the only situation for them today is to be consulted before any kind of project, any kind of road, any kind of dam, any kind of whatever extractive enterprises come into the territory to explain what they are doing and possibly for them to accept or to say, no, we don't want this kind of development. We want development which could be beneficial to us.
We know as well that some Native Americans are actually being prosecuted, even with crimes as far as terrorism, for trying to protect their lands. What can be done to try and protect those Native Americans from those kinds of prosecutions?
We have to force the state to be a strong state. A strong state does not mean authoritarian or whatever. A strong state means they have institutions and they make the law be respected. And in Mexico in particular, this is extremely complicated. The number of people being killed since, a few years ago until now is enormous. We are more than, 2,000 people killed. And indigenous peoples are part of it. They are disappearing. They are being killed. The companies are using also the private milice, the private police, and that is not the respect of the law that we could expect from a modern state today.
Indeed. And then some of that discrimination and land grabs that you've been talking about there in Mexico and across Latin America is, of course, also a problem further north in the United States. The latest source of tension there, Bear Ears Park. The Utah Nature Reserve has been cut by 85%. President Donald Trump says the move will allow local authorities to develop the land more easily, but that's alarmed environmentalists as well as Native Americans. Yuka Roya has the story.
This is sacred land for Native Americans. Named after the distinctive Twin Peaks, Bears Ears is a geological gem deep in the state of Utah. The unique landscape fascinates environmentalists and adventurers alike. Here, a group of tourists are visiting some homes carved into the rocks.
This one's pretty impressive just by the rock formation above it that makes it look like it's on fire. That's what really makes this one kind of stand out compared to others.
To protect against overdevelopment, some 550,000 hectares of land around the site were designated a national monument in 2016. But now, local Native American communities feel their heritage is in jeopardy.
I would hate it if this road end up paved. I would hate to see public restrooms be built, trees knocked down to accommodate parking lots.
You guys have your churches that you guys go to. This is our way of protecting ourselves, continuing our tradition.
Last December, President Donald Trump shrank the size of the nature preserve by 85%, the largest reduction of a national monument in US history. It opened up the area not only to tourism development, but also to oil and gas.
It's a new drill pad there.
Angelo Baca from the Navajo tribe says drilling activities have multiplied on the edge of the site and could expand further into the area.
Right now it's beautiful and wild and intact, and we don't want industry coming in and encroaching where they were going to start destroying the landscape.
A number of lawsuits have been filed against Trump's decision. The fight to protect Bears Ears is set to continue in court.
That report from Bear Ears Park in Utah for us there. Well, to discuss the challenges in the United States, let's bring back in Irène Bellier from CNRS here in Paris. Let's talk a little bit then about the socioeconomic status of Native Americans in the United States. It's sometimes described as a vicious cycle where access to education or lack of it leads to unemployment, which leads further back into the marginalisation of these communities. Perhaps tell us a bit about that socioeconomic cycle in the United States and what can be done to try and break it.
You should remember history, the American history and the North American history, be it the United States or Canada. They do share a common model of colonization, conquest of the land, and also displacement of the youth, the young people, the babies, the children were taken out of the families to be put into boarding school. And these boarding schools were created extremely far away, and the people were sent far away from the family so they could not escape. In order to, what they said in that moment was to kill the Indian, to raise up or to educate the man, the human being or whatever. And the idea was to get rid of the Indian, and the educational system has been the responsibility of that. Furthermore, you have now the question of collapsing of and circulation of ideas. The people now, indigenous peoples, are now access to internet, to telephone, to whatever, and they want to access also modernity. So they want to be part of society. And what we observe is that in most societies, in most countries where you have indigenous people, when they are not in the land, they are in the cities. And when they are in the cities, they are exploited or they are left over. They are living in the cities with nothing to do but drink, for instance. And that is something which is extremely painful to see, that these people can't benefit. They are not part of society, even if they want to. Because they have been made ashamed of what they are also, you know.
Let me ask you just very briefly then at the end about Native American women, because they face a kind of double discrimination, don't they? Because of their community, but also because of their gender, suggesting that they're far more likely to be sexually assaulted than white women. What can be done about that? And have police kind of ignored this violence against Native American women?
The police system, the state system, has not been capable to reduce the level of violence against women. And this level of violence against women, we know now that it is increasing every time that you have new forms of work, of extraction, of mining, for instance. The mining companies which are settling somewhere, you have non-indigenous people, non-indigenous men who are coming, and they need girls. So sometimes they rape, sometimes they take, sometimes they pay for, and that is a main problem. And sometimes the women disappeared, and they disappeared. Where are they? They don't know. Yeah. Are they gone in a traffic or women traffic? Are killed? You know. And this is also part of the deconsideration of this family and these lives as not as important as non-indigenous lives. And this is a main issue. All lives are important. Non-indigenous and indigenous lives are equally important for. Right? But if the state does right measures, they can be assassinated. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are going to have to leave it there. But Ms. Bellier, thank you very much for your time. That was Irène Bellier from CNRS here in Paris, talking to us for this edition of Inside of the Americas. And thanks to you for watching. Do stay with us. More next week.